Welcome back.
It is officially 112 degrees in this room.
Yeah, and we can't use the fan because last week the fan made a lot of noise.
So we may make it through this podcast.
Yeah. Or we might just become puddles. If you hear some dripping and
That's
no more
us.
talking, that's us. Alright, well, how's your week been?
It feels like it's been a lot longer than 2 days.
That's for sure.
Today I was like, is it Tuesday or Wednesday? And I realized it was only Tuesday, and I was just like, how have I only been at work for 2 days this week?
Yeah, I know. Earlier, I also was reminded that it was not Wednesday, and it broke my heart a little bit.
I feel like I've been at work for at least 3 days this week.
Yeah, it's been a long week.
And to realize it had literally only been 2 days of this was a punch in the gut.
At least we only felt like we lost a day and not like we woke up on Tuesday and thought it was Friday.
Well, yeah. But it definitely felt like I'd been at work for at least 3 days this week, and then I realized that today was only the second day of work this week, and...
Yeah, I don't know what it is. And I mean, all of the kids are acting squirrely, which is weird because it's like, what are we on, like week 4, week 5 or something like that? Week 5 probably.
Something
and
like that.
It's our first like just regular week of school since school started, because like last week we were off on Monday. The week before that we had pep assembly. You know, it's like, this is just like a regular week of school, and they're all acting like we're about to go on break or something. Like, they get real squirrely.
And it's not even kind of time for any of those things.
No, I don't know what's going on. Oh, full moon. That was what it was. I did read something the other day about it was like a full moon and like a eclipse and something, and so good luck.
Great.
Yeah, so that may be what it is.
Something's probably in retrograde.
Absolutely, usually. All right. Well, the lizard's shedding.
Yeah.
I looked at her and I was like, she looks a little blue.
Just
Shed.
Just her hindquarters.
Her hind quarters are shedding.
She already shedded her head.
Yeah, she did. Yep. Well, anyway, so tonight I'm going to tell you a story that you definitely already know.
Okay.
It's been covered by various television shows, as well as about 7,852 podcasts.
Okay.
You don't know Lucky how you are, boy. So we're back in the USSR. I know, I completely bungled that.
I'm going to laugh if you are doing the story that I'm researching.
Yeah? Do you want to tell me what it is?
Is it the Dyatlov Pass?
Yeah.
Okay, well then I guess I'll stop researching the Dyatlov Pass.
Sure am.
Because that's what I was going to do next week, was the Dyatlov Pass.
No, you're not.
Because it's officially been solved.
No, it hasn't.
Yeah, it has.
No, it hasn't.
Yeah, it has.
I listened to 1,000 things.
So did I.
What'd you read?
I watched a podcast that was one of many podcasts that said it had been solved this year. And I will tell you what I learned at the end of the podcast.
I guess, because I had even been reading on the DyatlovPass.com website and didn't see anything about it being solved. Hold on. Now I have to look it up. Oops. I don't know how to type. I don't know. This one says it has not been solved.
Well, I've seen lots of podcasts recently in the last several months that say it has been solved, and
like I see that, but like I don't know.
I watched a podcast the other day that was talking about what they've discovered.
All right. Well, I guess we'll talk about the things that I have to talk about.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. No, this is literally what I've been watching all week.
Me too.
That's what I was watching when you and Kayla came in the room earlier at lunchtime.
Oh.
I was watching another podcast about the Dyatlov Pass.
I didn't even realize that you were watching anything.
So yeah, this is what I was going to do next week.
Okay. Well, you're back in the USSR.
Yeah. I'm also back to the drawing board.
All right. Well, anyway. So I guess I can skip my next line asking how familiar you are with the details.
Pretty darn.
Cool beans. Okay. Well, I guess, the very first time I had ever heard about it was Ancient Aliens.
Yeah.
I think was probably the ancient, or the Aliens in Evil Places episode that was about, like, the Japan Suicide Mountain and
because aliens
forest,
is one of many theories as to
it
what happened to these poor people.
So then, like, I've heard, I mean, like, I think I listened to it, probably the second time I ever heard about it was whenever, like, I had been listening to Morbid, and then M covered it on And That's Why We Drink, and, like, aside from those things, like, I had never really, like delved into it or anything. Like, I knew kind of just the basic information.
Yeah.
So I did, to prepare for this episode, I listened to the 2-part series that Astonishing Legends did. I listened to Dark Histories and Stuff You Should Know. And then I went back and I also watched the Ancient Aliens episode as well as the 2 episodes of Expedition Unknown. Did you watch any of that?
No, not this week. Okay. I have mostly been watching podcasts, and I was going to watch a documentary earlier, and I just hadn't gotten around to it.
Okay, well, I also started to read the book Dead Mountain, The Untold True Story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident by Donnie Eicher, but between school and life, I didn't get very far into it. I am planning to finish that book, though, because it seemed like it was a really good book.
And I think that's the book where they came up with the theory that it was the sound that the wind makes that drove them insane.
Yeah, that is. Yeah. So, I didn't really have time to get through more than, I think I got through like 2 or 3 chapters of it, but I'll reference it a little bit, though, just from what I read and just kind of flipping through it for information. So anyway, like I said before, I kind of knew the basic information, you know, that everyone knows. The hikers went missing, they were found, then the theories about how they had died.
Right.
But some of the sources that I used in researching had a lot of information that I didn't know that was really important. So, just a real quick trigger warning. There's some graphic descriptions of how the hikers were found, and it was pretty gruesome. Additionally, while we all know that I have a little French candlestick living inside of me, I do not have a tiny Russian Baba Yaga living inside of me.
No.
And so my pronunciations are going to be rough. But I did listen to Russian people on Expedition Unknown say these things, and so...
Yeah, I planned to do a very thorough Googling before I tried to say any of the words that are in the story. Because...
Well, you know what I'm going to do as I always do, and we're just going to fly by the seat of my pants. And we're going to hope for the best. I think I wrote 1 word down phonetically.
Yeah.
And it wasn't even a hard word. So.
Was it Ural?
No, I knew how to say that. No, it was Vijay. So, that was the only one. Okay, well, this story starts in January 1959, when Mama was almost born.
Wasn't quite born yet.
Not quite. But she was getting there.
Yes. Almost done cooking. We are at the Ural Polytechnic Institute, which is now called the Ural Federal University in Yekaterinburg, Russia. Now, this is one of Russia's largest industrial cities. It's a vital railway junction on the Trans-Siberian Railway. You know, maybe you can't pronounce any words.
Do you want to tell the story? And it's recognized as the Russian capital of street art.
Ooh.
Yeah. But it wasn't always such a hip happening place. In fact, in January 1959, I think the Soviet Union tried to keep people from thinking about it at all, because it was a major military industrial center during the Cold War, and in 1959 we were right in the thick of the Cold War. So it was designated as a closed city, meaning that foreigners were restricted from entering the city. 2 other fun facts about Yekaterinburg: it was the place where the Romanov family was executed, and it was the home base for Boris Yeltsin, who later became Russia's first democratically elected president.
It's also in the heart of the Ural Mountains, which are also considered to be the gateway to Siberia. So it's also really effing cold there.
Yes.
I don't want to go to the gateway of Siberia. I feel like I'd rather, I don't know.
And this is winter in Siberia.
Yeah, it's winter in Siberia. So, well, and it's funny because in the Donnie Eicher, did I say that right? I know it's Eicher.
I can't
Donnie
remember.
Eicher, yeah. From like the beginning of the book that I read, because he went on a hike to the Dyatlov Pass, and he said that like the leader of his hike or something said something about that it's not that they weren't even in Siberia like technically, but that Siberia is more of a state of mind than an actual place. As hot as I am, I kind of want to be in a Siberia state of mind. So, I don't know. But
maybe talking about what we're about to talk about will make us nice and cold.
Maybe. So, again, January 1959, Ural Polytechnic Institute. A group of 9 students were part of a hiking club led by 23-year-old engineering student Igor Dyatlov. This group consisted of 7 men and 2 women who were all exceptional students and hikers, and they ranged in age from 20 to 24.
I've always heard there were 10.
Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay.
But leaving from the institute, there were 9.
Okay.
So they were all essentially very young adults, kids even, if you like want to think of them that way. Their names are, and again, please forgive me for my pronunciations. Again, we have Igor Dyatlov, which, I mean, that's what it's named for. So,
because he was the leader of the pack.
Yes.
And
Yuri Doroshenko, Ludmila Dubanina, Alexander Kolevatov, Zenaida Kolmogorova, and she went by Zena, Yuri Krivonishenko, and he went by Georgie, Rustem Slobodin, he went by Rustic, and Nikolai Thibault Brignol, and then Yuri Yudin, because, you know, Yuri is the Jaden of 1959. Yes. They were all either students or graduates of the Institute. On January 23rd, 1959, the group was preparing to embark on a ski hiking expedition to reach the Otorten Mountain. This trek would earn the group their grade 3 hiking certification, which was the highest ranking you could get, and they would earn the titles of Masters of Sport, and that would allow them to teach their craft to other people, and I guess this was kind of a big deal for them. The requirements for the certification were that you had to cover at least 186 miles. A third of those miles had to be over challenging terrain. Your trip had to have a minimum duration of 16 days with no fewer than 8 days spent in uninhabited regions, and spend at least 6 nights camping completely in winter conditions. None of this sounds like anything I ever want to do.
No, I don't want to teach a craft. I know we're talking about that, about skiing and hiking, but you know, I don't want to teach any kind of craft enough to put myself in those kinds of conditions.
Absolutely not. But these kids, they were hardy Russian kids.
Yes.
And not only were they like super smart, they had earned the reputations of being the most esteemed hiking group at the school, which I was just like, how many hiking groups were there? But again, it was like 1959 in Siberia. There probably wasn't a lot to do. So, let's see. Where I lost my place. Luda, one of the girls, while being the youngest of the group at just 20 years old, had actually been shot in the leg on a previous hiking trip when another member of that hiking party accidentally shot her with a hunting rifle.
Good times.
She had to be carried out of the mountains in Siberia over 50 miles of rugged terrain, but it was said that she just joked around with everyone and kept everybody's spirits up while they were getting her to a doctor and a hospital, because, again, she had literally been shot in the leg with a rifle in the big fat middle of nowhere, Siberia. Yuri Doroshenko had a story told about him because apparently on a different camping trip, he chased a bear off with nothing more than his nerve and a geologist's hammer. So on January 23rd, the group left the Institute, barely making it to the train station on time to board the train that would take them north. Being poor college students, they actually had purchased fewer tickets than they had people, and some of them would just hide under the seats when the conductor would come around to punch their tickets. Once they got on the train, they were joined by 37-year-old Semyon Zolotarov, who asked them to call him Sasha, which I will call him because his name is really hard. Sasha was supposed to go with another group's expedition, but their timeline didn't work out or something, and so he asked if he could tag along with Igor's group. The group quickly accepted Sasha, and Georgie pulled out his mandolin, and they sang the train right away. So the train took them to the city of Ivdel, and they arrived there on January 25th, where they then took a truck to Vizhai, the one word that I wrote down.
The one word that I wrote down the pronunciation of.
This is the last inhabited settlement that far north. From there, on January 27th, they started their hike to Otorten. They had one small hiccup the next day when Yuri Yudin decided to leave the hike and head back home. Yudin was kind of sickly. I don't know if sickly is even the right word, but I guess he had some lifelong illnesses that he had battled. He suffered from rheumatism, a heart condition, and chronic knee and back pain, which to me doesn't really sound ideal health for the hike they were planning. No. So I clicked something and now I've lost my whole place. Oh, there we are. Okay. So, I mean, not only did it not seem healthy for that hike, it doesn't sound healthy for any hike.
No.
But in the book Dead Mountain, Iker says that Yudin had been forced to take a year off from school due to illness, but the hiking had restored his vitality and he enjoyed it. And all of the hikers on this trip were grade 2 hikers, so he was skilled at his craft. So it wasn't like he was just this kid that was just tagging along or whatever. He knew what he was doing. He did find himself too ill to remain on the trip, though, so he left them. Everything else seemed to go fine until February 1st. There were diaries and cameras found with the hikers' belongings that documented their trip quite well. And I think this was part of them gaining their grade 3 certification. They had to document their trip because it's not like they could put their Fitbits on and track their progress, right. I guess. So some sources have said that on February 1st, the group didn't travel very far. And they had been traveling in some not ideal conditions and sort of got off the path. That they were a little farther north or farther west or something than they were supposed to be. And even though they were skilled with the compass, the wind and snow and everything, it just got them off course. So they found a pretty flat expanse of ground to camp on, and they set up their tent. There were trees below them, but they think that maybe they had opted to not go down there because it would mean backtracking and losing ground. Now, I've seen pictures of this area where they hiked, and it's pretty desolate, but it wasn't until I watched Expedition Unknown that, I really, fully, I guess, I don't know what the word is that I want to say, appreciate how desolate it was. Because, you see pictures, and it's all black and white, and it's snowy, and there's nothing around and everything, but Expedition Unknown, they actually traveled there with the camera crew and everything, and, they're standing, they, set up their tent farther away from where the pass was, where they had, this group had set up their tent, and then they went by foot to the actual site where they think that the tent was. And it's just literal Siberian desert. There's nothing as far as the eye can see. It's just snow. And so it just, and it looks freaking cold. And they have to keep their faces covered because if they have their faces uncovered for any length of time, they can get frostbite. And even, what's the guy's name from Expedition Unknown? Is it Josh?
Josh.
Yeah, his mustache was all frozen. And it just looked miserable, really. And another thing, I didn't even write this down, but, they had, Expedition Unknown had all of this equipment. They had, the fancy jackets and ski wear and boots. And Josh was even saying that his, was completely covered in hand warmers, down his boots and in his pants and in his jacket and everything. These kids didn't even have insulated jackets or insulated boots or anything because it was 1959.
And
which will make what they found later even more bewildering.
Right. And so it's, I just can't imagine, like, even with all of the equipment that they had in, like, 2019 or whatever that show was filmed, that it was that miserable. And just to think about that these kids didn't have even close to that kind of equipment with them. And they were just, like, doing it for funsies. Mm-hmm. So, anyway, they're built of a different stock than I am.
Yes.
So, anyway, it was, like, negative 20 degrees. The wind was blowing. They set up their tent about 5 p.m. on the slope of Kolosiakol, which was named by the Mansi people, the native people of the region. And this translates roughly to Dead Mountain or Silent Peak. And Dead Mountain doesn't seem to be as sinister as people make it out to be. The Mansi have said that it was named that because there's no big game and nothing really grows there. So it's not that, like, spooky Dead Mountain. Yeah, it was just that
comes to whoever climbs this mountain.
Yes, apparently. So the Mansi... Oh, I already said that. So, and I think people make it out to be sinister now because of what happened.
Yeah.
So the group had dinner around 6 or 7 p.m. Again, this is all documented in their diaries. And sometime later that evening, and we're assuming that it was that evening because this is the last entry in their diaries, something scary happened, but no one knows what. So literal weeks go by because, again, this is 1959 and Al Gore had not yet invented the internet. So the plan, as told by Dyatlov to Yuri Yudin, was that when they returned to Vijay around February 12th, he would telegram the sports club to let them know that they were back. However, he also told Yudin that he expected the trip to last longer. And also, Yudin didn't go straight back home after he left the group. He went to visit some friends. And so it wasn't that odd that they hadn't been heard of, like, by the 12th. And then no one even realized that they should have been heard of from before Yudin returned back from school, or returned back to the school. So on February 20th, after the urging of friends and family to launch a rescue operation, the first groups went out. And these groups consisted of volunteer students and teachers. On February 26th, searchers found the group's tent. It was still standing where it had been erected. I mean the E word.
Yes.
Not that other.
Word.
Yeah. And it was badly damaged. One of the rescuers said, quote, "The tent was half torn down and covered with snow. It was empty and all the group's belongings and shoes had been left behind." And it was a very strange sight. So one of the things that hikers would do in these snowy expeditions was line the floor of the tent with their packs and jackets for an extra layer of protection. But all of these things were still in place. Their boots were still all lined up against the wall of the tent. It was all very orderly inside of the tent. The heating stove was, like, kind of in the middle of the tent, but it had not been assembled. And one of the things that they think reason why for that was just because, I guess, even in their diaries on previous nights, they hadn't assembled the tent because they felt like they were warm enough and they didn't need to. And this stove was really difficult to put together. Like, they would have competitions to see how fast they could put it together.
Yeah.
The money and food were still in the tent. There was even, like, a piece of ham wrapped up in a napkin that was still sitting there. Their skis and poles were stuck vertically in the snow outside the tent, like you would see, like, how people do that thing when they need to be outside doing things in the cold.
Yes.
And there was snow collapsing the tent, but remember, it had been weeks since they had been there. And also, I was thinking that, because the investigators later determined that the tent had been cut from the inside. Yes. And so probably that also, it assisted the snow with collapsing it, like making it fall in on itself. But, there probably had been a fair amount of snow that snowed in the weeks that had come.
But again, pay attention to the fact that they cut themselves out of their tent.
Yes, so it had been cut from the inside out. They didn't go out the door.
No.
They took a knife and they cut
themselves out. Like, in a hurry, they
Yeah.
sliced themselves out of the tent.
Right. After the searchers found the tent, they found footprints leading down towards the trees. Now, the problem with these footprints, though, one, investigators determined that they'd been made by people wearing either just socks or bare feet. Mm-hmm. But another thing was that they weren't in a hurry. They weren't, like, running. It seemed like they were, like, in a line, very orderly, walking away from the tent. It wasn't, like, frantic like you would think would happen if you just cut yourself out of your tent.
Right.
One of the sets of footprints did have a shoe on just one foot, and it was like a chain of 8 or 9 footprints. When they followed the footprints down to the edge of the forest, they found 2 bodies, and this was February 27th. So, do you remember this
Yes,
one?
I remember this well.
Yeah. Okay. You know, you cause a lot of havoc on your
birthday.
birthday.
I find that a lot of terrible things happen on or around my birthday.
You set a fire.
Mm-hmm.
You attack some kids. I don't know what's the matter with you.
I don't know.
So these bodies that they found were the remains of Yuri Krivonishenko. I think part of it is that I typed it wrong on this part. Yeah. But this was Georgie. And Yuri Doroshenko. And also, the Shenkos are just killing me because they're very close names. They were found shoeless and dressed only in their underwear. But more specifically, Doroshenko was wearing a sleeveless cotton undershirt, short sleeve checkered shirt, short swimming trunks, blue cotton underpants, and a different set of wool socks on both feet. The socks on his left foot were burned. His underwear was ripped. His hair on the right side of his head was burned. His face was covered in blood. His upper lip was swollen. His right cheek, soft tissue, was covered with gray foam, and gray liquid was coming out of his open mouth, which is consistent with pulmonary edema. His right armpit was bruised. There were bruises along the upper part of his forearm. There was a bruise with bleeding on the back of his hand. But officially, his death was ruled as hypothermia.
Mm-hmm.
Georgie was dressed in an undershirt. No, I said Georgie. No, did I? No, this is Georgie. Georgie was dressed in an undershirt, long sleeve checkered shirt, swimming shorts, long underpants, and a torn sock on his left foot. He had bruises to his forehead and left temporal lobe. The tip of his nose was missing, probably from animals because he was found like face up. And his ears were frostbitten. His left foot was badly burned. He had various bruises and abrasions on his hands and legs, and he had also apparently bitten off part of the back of one of his knuckles. He was found with skin from his knuckles in his teeth, and his death was also ruled hypothermia. So these 2 boys were found face up under a cedar tree, lying next to each other with their arms stretched over their heads. There were remnants of a fire, and there were broken branches as high up as 5 meters and skin found embedded in the bark of the tree. There was also evidence that young trees nearby had had branches and twigs cut off with a knife. The consensus here is that one or some of them climbed the tree for various reasons. Mm-hmm. It could have been to hide from whatever scared them out of their tent, or to break branches for the fire, or to get up high enough to find the tent. Mm-hmm. The Dyatlovpass.com website says that the smaller branches from the younger trees would have been too wet and young to burn, and so they were probably gathered for protection. The burns on the men's feet probably occurred from them putting their bare feet into the fire to warm up. Liver mortis on Doroshenko didn't match how he was found, plus with their hands up over their heads, it was most likely that their friends took their clothes after they had died and then moved them to be resting together. So the same day, other search parties found the remains of Igor Dyatlov and Zenaida Kolmogorova. Dyatlov was found face up about 300 meters away from the cedar tree. He was wearing an unbuttoned fur sleeveless vest, a blue sweater, long-sleeved red cotton shirt, blue sleeveless cotton singlet, ski pants over his pants, no shoes, but 1 cotton sock on his left foot and 1 woolen sock on his right foot. His watch had stopped at 5:31. He had some minor abrasions to his forehead and face, bruised knees and ankles. His right hand had bruises consistent with hitting something. Like if you made a fist to punch, like that's where his bruises were, like were on his knuckles. His death was also ruled hypothermia. But additionally, one of the shirts he was wearing was identified by Yuri Yudin as a shirt he had given to Doroshenko, so this was probably taken after he had died. Zena was found about 630 meters from the cedar tree, face down. She was wearing more clothes than the other 3 guys were. She had on 2 hats, long sleeve undershirt, sweater, checkered shirt, another sweater, cotton sport pants, trousers, ski pants, and 3 pairs of socks. She had some minor abrasions to her face and hands, but her weirdest injury was a long bruise on the right side of her torso that looked like it could have been made by a baton. Mm-hmm. And her death was ruled hypothermia due to violent accident. So that one had the additional due to violent accident at the end. 6 days later, Rustem Slobodin was found. Rustem was about 480 meters from the cedar tree. And he actually, if you look at the diagram of where they were found, he was in between Zina and Igor, but he had just been found later. He was also face down. He was wearing a long sleeve undershirt, shirt, sweater, 2 pairs of pants, 4 pairs of socks, and 1 felt boot on his left foot. So this was probably the footsteps that they saw. His watch stopped at 8:45 a.m. Slobodin had the same kind of fighter bruises on his knuckles, but he also had abrasions to the sides of his head and his skull was cracked. The skull fracture could have been made from a blunt object, it was noted. People find Rustem's injuries weird because if you were to attribute these injuries to, like, just repeatedly falling, even in a state of disorientation, like, you would fall on your palms, like you would fall on your hands, and his hands didn't really have a lot of damage like his palms didn't. And what this would have happened just because of his injuries, like every time he would have fallen, he would have hit his head, and that just isn't very likely. And his death was also ruled hypothermia. The other weird or sad thing, if you want to look at it either way, is that, like, they were in a straight line kind of leading back to the tent, with Zina being closest to the tent. Mm-hmm. And she really wasn't that far away from the tent, like from where her body was found. The last 4 members of the group weren't found until May 5th, after the snow had begun to melt. They were in a ravine about 70 to 75 meters on the other side of the cedar from where the tent was. And one thing that I didn't hear about before, but found out from the dyatlovpass.com website, was that they had actually dug a den in the snow, which is like a survival technique. And so they had even, like, the 2 that they found in the den seemed like they had actually even stayed kind of warm because, you know, snow insulates. 2 of the 4, though, were found feet away from the den, and no one's really sure why they weren't inside. They had obviously cut branches to line the floor of the den to offer some barrier between themselves and the snow, but the knife that was used to cut the trees, and even the ones from by the cedar tree, was never recovered. And so I don't know if it just got lost in the snow or in the river, or somebody took it. Ludmila Dubanina was, to me, the strangest find. If you see the picture of her, she's on her knees with her face and chest pressed against the rock. Did you see that picture?
I don't think I've seen the picture, but I've heard descriptions of.
But it's weird because, I mean, like, all the other ones are kind of laying down, but she's on her knees, like, up against a rock, like, with her face, like, in the rock. Mm-hmm. And since the snow was melting, there was also water rolling over her body. Her remains were also pretty gruesome. I'll start with what she was wearing, like we did with the others. She was wearing a short sleeve shirt, long sleeve shirt, and 2 sweaters. One of the sweaters was Georgie's, and it was radioactive. She was also wearing underwear, long socks, 2 pairs of pants. The external pair of pants was burned and ripped. She had a small hat and 2 pairs of socks, and she was also she had also cut a sweater into 2 pieces. One of them was wrapped around her left foot, and the other half was found in the snow. So, you know, nobody knows if, like, she just lost it when she was running or, you know, whatever. But it seems like she had tried to protect her feet a little more by wrapping them up with this sweater. But her injuries, so her eyes and her tongue were missing. The soft tissue around her eyes and eyebrows were missing, as was the tissue around her upper lip. Her nose cartilage was broken and flattened. Mm-hmm. She had several broken ribs, a bruise in the middle of her left thigh, and a massive hemorrhage in her heart's right atrium, probably caused by one of the broken ribs. Now, her eyes and her tongue could be explained away by scavengers because she had been out in the elements for months. However, there was a dark brown mucosal mass in her stomach, and some believe this was coagulated blood, which would indicate that her heart was still beating when her tongue was removed. However, the autopsy does not note anything about the state of the tissue other than just the words, the tongue was missing.
Yeah.
Alexander Kolotov, yeah, there we go, and Sasha Zolotarov. I think it's the inflection, because I never can get the accent on the correct syllable. They were kind of found in an embrace, like a spooning position, with Alexander being the bigger spoon, as if he were either trying to carry Sasha or protect him in some way or keep him warm. Sasha was wearing 2 hats, a scarf, a short-sleeved shirt, and a long-sleeved shirt, a black sweater, and a coat. He was also wearing underwear, 2 pairs of pants, and a pair of ski pants. He had on a pair of socks and a pair of warm leather handmade shoes. He also had a camera around his neck and a pencil and a notebook in his hands. And we'll talk about more of that in a minute. But Sasha's eyeballs were also missing. He had an open wound on the right side of his head with his skull exposed, and he had several broken ribs. Now, what people find super weird about Ludmila and Sasha's injuries, but they were similar in direction and force, even though their body types were different. They were also so extensive that the medical examiners on the case have said that they were crushed with immense force, comparing the damage to being hit by a car. Additionally, there was no soft tissue damage. There weren't any bruises or anything that you would expect to see with internal injuries that were that traumatic. So it's not like, if you got hit by a car, you would have bruises on the outside as well as the broken ribs on the inside. And there weren't the bruises on the outside. Alexander was wearing a sleeveless shirt, a long sleeve shirt, sweater, fleece sweater, ski jacket that was unzipped and damaged, shorts, light pants, ski pants, canvas pants, woolen socks, and he had an open wound behind his ear, a deformed neck. I don't know if that means that it was broken.
Yeah.
And a knee injury. His autopsy was also weirdly vague. It basically just said those things. And additionally, the waistband of his sweater and the lower part of his ski pants tested positive for radiation. Yeah. And last was Nikolai Thibault Brignol. He was wearing a canvas fur hat, knitted woolen hat, shirt, wool sweater, fur and sheepskin jacket, underwear, sweatpants, cotton pants, and ski pants. I can't even imagine wearing that many pairs of pants. Woolen socks and felt boots. It's like when Joey's wearing all of Chandler's clothes.
Yes. And
it just looks like you can't move and you're immediately sweating. So it's speculated that he and Sasha were clothed better because they might have been outside the tent when whatever happened. Like maybe they stepped out to pee or something, but that they were already outside. And so that they were already dressed for being outside. Nikolai had 2 watches that stopped at 8:14 and 8:39. He had a pretty extensive head injury. He had multiple fractures to his temporal bone that were depressed and splintered. And again, this was compared to the force of an impact of a car traveling at a high speed. This could have occurred if he had been blown off the top of the ravine by a strong gust of wind or just fallen and hitting his head on a rock. But that's kind of shot down because there's no soft tissue damage.
Yeah.
And also, people speculate that maybe somebody hit him in the head, but again, there's no soft tissue damage. Yeah. And so wouldn't that leave something when you see something on the outside? Wouldn't you think? So what happened? There are so many theories. 1,000 of them. So the one that was horrible and not true is that people wanted to blame the local Mansi people.
Yes.
Because no matter where you are, people are always racist. And they treat their indigenous population as hostile and savage. So this can pretty much be debunked because right away, the Mansi people were some of the first volunteers to help search for the hikers. And they're peaceful people. They're not...
Yeah, it was said that they weren't happy about them being there.
Yeah,
and that they were a peaceful people.
Yeah, and there was one rumor that maybe they had disturbed some sacred space or something. But Mansi people have said, we don't have a sacred space.
Yeah.
We just pray at home. So that just seems to be just a racist theory.
Course.
I read today a theory that a Wolverine broke into their tent. And I guess that, like, they were cooking their dinner at this time, and a Wolverine smelled it and, like, got into their tent somehow, and that they, like, got out of the tent really fast to get away from the Wolverine, and that they just walked into the trees to, like, give the Wolverine the minute to eat his food and then get out of there. And then they weren't just expecting it to get so cold so fast, and that everything else happened. But everything else that I read said the tent was pretty orderly on the inside. There was still that piece of ham wrapped in a napkin. Wolverines are very stinky, and there was one thing that was like, well, they tried to bring search dogs off of the plane, and the search dogs didn't want to come off of the plane, and so maybe the search dogs smelled Wolverine, and so that's why they didn't come off the plane. But I feel like that one's kind of far-fetched.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of them are.
Well, I mean, the next one is not. It is the yeti, or the mink, as they are called in the region. This was largely fueled by a picture that came from one of the cameras found in the tent. You can see a dark human-shaped figure peeking from behind a tree, but this was probably just one of the hikers, and, film wasn't fantastic in 1959. One theory is that an escaped prisoner from the nearby gulag attacked the hikers, but after checking with the gulag, no one was missing. Plus, none of the hikers' clothes or money was taken, and you would think if you were escaping from a gulag that you would take all of these things. So, ancient alien theorists believe that it could have been a UFO. A picture found on the hikers' cameras shows glowing lights in the sky, and locals in the area also reported seeing lights in the sky in the days surrounding the hikers' incident. They also attribute the irradiated clothing to the UFOs. Right. But another theory that seems to be a pretty popular theory is that the lights were from a secret military testing in the area. And a couple of theories tie into this. Some believe that the hikers were killed by a secret missile launch, but others believe that the hikers just witnessed a secret military test and then were killed for it. So one of the ways Soviet special forces tortured people was by pressing on their chests. And this could account for the pulmonary edema found on Yuri Doroshenko's autopsy. Ludmila's tongue could also have been removed as part of a torture exercise. Nikolai's crushed skull could have come from the butt of a rifle. The fighting injuries on some of the men could have been from altercations with soldiers. A secret missile launch or some other military test could also attribute to the irradiated clothing. And then remember, we talked about Sasha's camera. So Yuri Yudin, the survivor guy, he claims that no one knew about this camera. He thought that the 4 cameras found in the tent were the only cameras on the trip, and he felt that it was like a secret camera, and nobody knows why. So there's a theory that Sasha was some kind of like Cold War spy and had tagged along with the hikers to maybe gain access to this area. But no one knows what's on Sasha's camera, though, because the water from the river damaged the film. And additionally, government and military had become involved in the search for the hikers, and when the bodies in the ravine were found, a colonel that was on site grabbed the notebook from Sasha's hand, proclaimed that there was nothing written in it, dadgummit, and nobody's ever seen the notebook again. So the vague autopsies seem to also point to the idea of some kind of government cover-up. Additionally, there was a lot of information in the files that's been redacted or not released at all. And then the last theory that I have to talk about is the idea of the infrasound. So I think, and we talked about this a minute ago, it was posited by Eichner in the Dead Mountain book. And the idea is that the wind will blow at a frequency that people can't hear, but it can cause a sense of extreme dread, and that affected the hikers and caused them to essentially have an episode where they thought they were in danger and escape out into the sub-zero temperatures. And my only question here is, would it really have affected all of them exactly the same way at the same time? Because, I mean, I was thinking back to last year when that goofball kept playing the dog whistle sound on his phone, and I couldn't hear it at all.
Yeah.
And some of the other kids could hear it, and some people couldn't hear it. And so would all 10 of these hikers been able to hear and react the same way.
Yeah.
And there's other theories, from mushrooms to hurricanes. The official party line seems to be that the hikers heard an avalanche, and that caused them to flee as quickly as they could out of the tent. But there are holes in that theory as well, because I saw those pictures that avalanche last year caused, and what was it, like, was it Iceland or
I don't remember.
Sweden or someplace that's cold, and there was a lot of debris and damage that was caused by that. And when you look at the pictures from when they found the hiker's tent, the tent's still standing, other than the snow weighing it down in the middle. And that was also, like we talked about, was probably whenever they sliced out of it, that the snow also, was able to weigh it down or whatever. Their ski poles and skis were still standing vertically. Right. The footprints leading away from the tent were orderly. They were not running. The mountain they camped on is also not very large and also not steep. And you think of steep mountains for avalanches. And
they did some testing and said that it could have avalanched.
Yeah. It could have avalanched, but it would have been a small avalanche. And they said that maybe that's why they cut out of the tent, was because, like, the snow had covered it, and so they went out of it. But it's not very likely, at least as far, like with the footprints and all of the other things, it just doesn't seem like they were really running away from something other than cutting out of the tent. And I don't really know why they would have cut out of the tent, where that seems like a very, like, frantic, I need to get out of this tent right now kind of thing. But then they walked to the trees. Like, that's, I think, the part that really bothers me. But either way, 8 kids and Sasha lost their lives in a horrific, mysterious way that will probably never be solved unless Faren tells us right now that it has been. And like, to me, I think that the government, if they were covering it up, unless somebody comes forward and says this happened, this is what's actually in the files, I don't know that anything will ever actually come of it. So anyway, tell me.
Well, I don't have all of the details because I was still researching the story and was going to listen to the podcast again that explained exactly what they say happened. Mm-hmm. But it does lead back to a government cover-up. Mm-hmm. That in 2020 they came out and said that it was an avalanche, and they were basically like, okay, this is it. We've solved it. It was an avalanche.
Right.
But that this year they have discovered some other stuff that leads back to a government cover-up, that they were executed by military that found them in this place, that they had been, like, stalking them with, like, technology that can read their, like, their, what's the word? Hold on, I gotta think of the word. Like, when you're at the hospital and they read all your thingies.
Like your vitals?
Yeah.
Okay.
That could, like, read their vitals from, like, a great distance.
So not just, like, a thermal imaging camera or something? Okay.
And...
which I don't even know was invented in 1959.
Yeah. But that they were told to eliminate them. Mm. Because they were in an area that they were not supposed to be in, but they did not know they were in an area they were not supposed to be in.
Yeah. But I feel like if it was an execution, wouldn't it have been done in a cleaner way?
I don't know.
Like, I could see them, like, hitting them and, like, torturing them or whatever. Like, why are you here or whatever. Mm-hmm. But I feel like in the end, they would have just, like, shot them in the head like an execution.
I don't know. I guess unless they wanted it to look like they had succumbed to the elements or whatever.
Well,
but like I said, I wasn't done researching, and so I can't explain it to the degree that I would like to explain it. Mm-hmm. But they've supposedly found evidence of this, like journals that have the information in it that literally says to get rid of them.
Yeah.
There was one thing from Expedition... What's the name of the show? Unknown. At the very end of the second episode, one of old Russian man that researches all of this gave Josh a copy of a document that was dated February 6th that made it sound like they already knew about their deaths. But then whenever I was looking into it more, it's possible, because the way that I don't know if they still write their dates like this, but the way they would write their dates, it was the year and the day, but then the month was written like a Roman numeral. Mm-hmm. And so it was just 2 ticks, like for February, but that they think that was like, I don't know, not a typo, but like that they wrote it down wrong, that it was actually April or something, but that they were reading about February, and so they just wrote the 2 ticks like it was February. But it's written like that in several places in the document, and so I'm like, would you have made that mistake multiple times? Because it's like a letter from like a prosecutor or something talking about these hikers' deaths or whatever, and it's from February 6th, and they weren't found until the 26th.
Yeah.
And so, or the 27th, I guess. But, I don't know. Like, that's kind of been written off as a typo kind of a thing. I don't know. I'm curious now about what you were talking about. So
yeah, I'll see if I can find the podcast that I listened to that told the story about what supposedly has been uncovered. But they said they found like a lead box that contained like some badly damaged like more like military journals and like some military insignia and stuff like that in the area. And
I mean, and I understand that, like, whenever you Google something, like, the AI overview is just, like, based off of things, but, like, I just typed in Dyatlov Pass hikers executed, and it just says, no, they were not executed, they died under mysterious circumstances. But one thing that I didn't mention, they kept saying that they were killed by a compelling natural force. Like, that was, like, their, like, compelling natural force, but I don't know.
But they also said that one of the pictures on the camera was, they had, like, tried to, in some way, because it's not a digital camera, obviously you can't just go and delete a picture, but they had tried to get rid of one of the pictures on the camera, and I don't know.
I don't know either, but I'll tell you, it's got me in a, I don't know, not a tizzy, but it's definitely something that's interesting, and I think like I said, I think I'm gonna go back and read the book, even though like we're already done doing this, because
and I'm gonna rewatch that podcast so I can explain to you in greater detail what it said, because I was planning on rewatching that visual podcast that I was watching.
Well, like, in a way, and it I mean, they're not the same at all, but, like, it just, like, the whole time, I just kept thinking about Mount Everest, because I'm completely fascinated with Mount Everest, because I just don't understand the, I don't know if it's, like, I don't understand the thrill, or I don't understand why these people pay like hundreds of thousands of dollars to go hike this mountain that odds are they're either never going to actually reach the peak or they're going to die on. And you know, these kids were like going off into the middle of Siberia to get like this hiking certification or whatever. I don't need a hiking certification that bad.
No.
And, like, even, like, with Everest, it's, like, it's such, like, a grueling hike or climb or whatever. You have to have all of this specialized equipment. You're paying for all of these permits. You're paying for guides. You're paying for Sherpas. And when you do get to the peak, you're only there for a second.
Because there's so many other people in these groups that are waiting to get up there, and you have to get up there and get straight back down, because if you don't turn around and go back right away, you're going to die coming down the mountain. Mm-hmm. And there's all of these bodies just sprinkled all over Everest from these people that, like, for some reason thought that they needed to go climb this mountain.
I know.
And you spend, like, weeks there because you have to acclimate yourself. So it's like base camp 1, you acclimate, and you're there for, like, a couple of weeks, and then you go to the next one, and then you just keep going.
And you, like, hike up and hike back down. And
yeah, you have to, like, keep going up and down, like, to, like, get used to the altitude. And then you deal with all of this, like threats of hypothermia and just, like, oxygen sickness and altitude sickness. And I don't understand why anybody wants to do something that bad that's that, like, scary and deadly. Mm-hmm. And it fascinates me. I've always wanted to do something that's, like, a haunting, like, stories of, like, the hauntings of Everest or whatever. But there's surprisingly few ghosts on Everest. You would think that there would be, like, a zillion.
Yeah.
But I can't find many ghost stories from Everest. If anybody has any, please tell me.
Yeah.
So anyway, that is our story.
The story of the week, apparently.
Well, did I miss anything that you felt like I should have said?
No, not really.
Okay. Well, good. Now we get to get ready for 3 more days of work.
3 more days of work. I get to come up with another topic for a story.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
Since I've been researching this one.
You are welcome. It's keeping you on your toes.
Just delaying me telling a story more and more.
You know, if you had just done it in the first place, then I wouldn't have done this.
I only started researching it a couple of days ago.
Yeah, I've been doing it for about a week. Since at least last weekend.
And it was just because I had seen so many things pop up about them solving it. And like I said, like, I don't have any proof that they have solved it, that it isn't just another...
Right.
Like, throwing you a bone kind of thing. Or if it's even true.
Right.
But...
I mean, I really, honestly, I think that unless somebody from the government comes forward and, like, declassifies stuff or whatever and says this happened, I don't think anybody's ever going to know what happened. Yeah. Because it may not have even been a government cover-up. It could have... Because some people think that the government did the covering up that they did just because they were ashamed that it happened. Yeah. Not that they had anything to do with it, but just that, like, they felt like it brought shame on the area or whatever. Plus, it was in a very secret part of Russia at the time that, you know, they were trying not to draw attention to. And so it could just have been those things. I mean, they really could have just had some kind of weird, like, they could have eaten some mushrooms or had some kind of weird episode, or, I don't know, thought it would be fun to see if they could go outside without their shoes on. I don't
know. But they've supposedly proved that there were, like, Russian experiments that happened in that area.
Oh, yeah, there were.
Hence the irradiated clothing and stuff like that.
Yeah, there absolutely were. I think that that's all been proven. Like, it was a secret military base. They were developing weapons in that area and all of these things. They'd even found, on Expedition Unknown, there was, like, a piece of metal, something that they thought maybe had come from, like, a fuel tank from a missile or something. And so they let Expedition Unknown take a piece of it to have it tested. And it did end up being a piece of, like, some kind of rocket or missile, but it was something that wasn't invented until after the incident had happened, and so it probably was just, like, junk out there from that.
Because, like, one of the theories was parachute mines, which...
I didn't see that one.
They would, like, drop and they would explode in the air, not on the ground. And that maybe that scared them, and...
Right. Well, and then, like, you know, they thought maybe they had the camera outside because the lights, they were, like, trying to take a picture of these lights, and then something happened while they were outside, and...
Well, they said that they had found, like, a makeshift tripod that they had put one of the cameras on.
I did
and that they don't know if they were trying to capture a image of whatever
was terrorizing them.
Mm-hmm. But the thing that still bothers me out of all of it is I have to cut myself out of this tent. I can't just go out the door because that's how fast I need to get out of here. Mm-hmm. But then I'm going to walk orderly to the trees. Yeah. I'm not going to run to the trees. I'm going to walk to the trees.
But to me...
And if there was an avalanche, wouldn't that have covered up their footprints?
But to me, that could sort of support the idea of it being a troop of military people who... Yeah. They cut themselves out of the tent because they heard something, coming, mm-hmm. and then the military guys had them march,
into the trees. Yeah, and then they covered up their footprints because I don't know why they wouldn't have covered up the hikers' footprints. No, that's weird, but they could have covered up their footprints, and nobody would have even known that happened. So mm-hmm. I don't know. It's weird. Whatever it was weird.
Yep.
I think it was not funny, but funny. The times that I had heard it before, I never really thought about it. Had been so long ago, 59, mm-hmm. and then just the idea. I think that they were all of these young kids, and it's a sad story, no matter what.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you got anything else?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, you can find us on social media at Twisted and Mysterious, or you can email us at twistedandmysteriousPodcast@gmail.com. Send us stories, send us story ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And leave us some reviews.
Yeah.
Good ones.
Yes.
Not mean ones. That way other people can be, or we can be recommended to other people, and then it will help us grow, and we can send you pretty presents.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Pretty ones.
Pretty ones. Only the pretty ones.
Only the prettiest for our listeners.
We don't send ugly presents out.
No.
All right. Well, that is all.
Yes, so as always, remember that people are gross, and don't get murdered, and don't go hiking in Siberia.
Absolutely not. Never do that. Okay, bye.
Bye.